I feel like we have not heard a lot of the Indians' history of South Africa, so this is good for us to know.
What's good, y'all? It's the Demouchets REACT, and we're back with another video. Who we got today, C?
Today we're back with another American reaction. Super excited about this video, guys. If you're new to us and we're new to you, make sure you scroll down, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the post notification bell because we're on the road to 100K. And we cannot get there without you guys, all right? Join the family. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
On November 16, 1860, a ship carrying 342 indentured Indians arrived in South Africa, marking the beginning of a long and painful period in the history of the Indian diaspora in the region. Between November 1860 and 1911, when the system of indentured labor was stopped, nearly 152,000 indentured laborers from across India arrived in Natal, South Africa. Today, South Africa is home to the largest population of people of Indian descent on the African continent, approximately 1.5 million people, the majority of whom are the descendants of indentured workers brought to the then colony of Natal between 1860 and 1911 to develop the sugar industry in this province. In this episode of African Biographics, we look at this system of indentured labor and the story of Indian South Africans. In 1843, Britain officially annexed Natal, South Africa. In 1856, Natal became a full crown colony. At around that time, the colony, caught up in throes of worldwide recession, was on the brink of financial ruin, economic collapse and bankruptcy. The province was poor and undeveloped, so every effort was made to attract European settlers to the region. New agricultural ventures were implemented. On 30 January 1852, after numerous trials, Edmund Morwood succeeded in perfecting the production of sugarcane on his farm in Natal. This success story brought more white colonizers into the country. As a result, the demand for labor for Natal's sugarcane fields increased dramatically. The Zulus, who were the indigenous people of this region, shunned the agricultural work. For them, the work was women's work and they could not identify with the wage market. They were also not amenable to contract employment. They were pastoralists and showed little interest in becoming wage earners. The solution to the labor shortage was arranged between the British government and the government of India. Keep in mind that during this period, the subcontinent of India was part of the British Empire. So with this arrangement, the Natal colony was permitted to import indentured labor, a practice that dated to the early 1800s in other parts of Africa, such as the island of Mauritius. The system of indenture was created mainly in response to the labor crisis experienced in sugar-producing areas after the abolition of slavery. The scourge of the slave trade came to an end within the British Empire in 1833 when England abolished it. Slaves throughout the British Empire were set free, and this heralded the end of free labor. Here's a brief explanation of what the indentured system entails. Indenture is a type of debt servitude, but it is different from slavery. Under the various terms of conditions of indentureship, workers are to receive food and a small monthly stipend in return for their labor. In the case of Indian indentured laborers, they were promised crown lands and citizenship at the end of 5 years, but unfortunately for them, this promise wasn't entirely honored.
Yeah, I kind of seen that coming.
Yeah, and you know what's sad? When we talk about this, oftentimes when we bring up these topics, it's a thing of the past, but there are forms of this labor and this slavery that's still going on in other areas of the world.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
where people just, for years and years and years, and they're in contracts for years and years and years. Their children are owed the debt to the person who they're slaving away for.
Yeah.
You know, so it's always sad. I do not like talking about slavery. I don't like talking about indentured labor. I don't know, but I feel like we have not heard a lot of the Indians' history of South Africa, so this is good for us to know.
Yeah, I'm locked in.
During this time, many parts of India were struck by severe famines and epidemics. Life was a continuous struggle for the people of India. So when the recruiters called at the villages, the people grabbed this opportunity to go to South Africa. New recruits were promised land, wealth and better prospects in Natal. Thousands of people left their villages in droves to seek a better future in Natal. But given the high levels of illiteracy, few workers understood the terms of the contract that they put their thumb imprint to. Many were commonly misled about where they were departing for and the wages that they would receive. Some of the workers were recruited from rural India to work in cities like Calcutta, but once they were there, they were tricked or persuaded to sign the contract, which took them to the immigration depot and to the plantations overseas. In other cases, they were lied to about the length of the journey. Over 2/3 of the Indians came from southern India, with the rest coming from northern India. The immigrants were for the most part from rural areas and were mainly low-caste Hindus from Madras, and about 1/3 were women. The ship SS Truro departed from Madras on October 12, 1860 with 342 passengers aboard and arrived in Durban on November 16 the same year, and was the first ship to bring Indian indentured laborers to Natal from India. The SS Belvedere departed from Calcutta on October 4, 1860 with 310 passengers aboard and arrived in Durban on November 26, 1860. Traveling conditions were relatively arduous and uncomfortable. Owing to the cramped conditions, congested traveling conditions and lack of proper sanitation, disease spread with ease and the mortality rate was high. Although the ship SS Truro escaped mortality, records show that during 1860 to 1866 there were 180 deaths on the ships. In 1 year between 1881 and 1882, there were reportedly 67 deaths. Upon arrival in Natal, the passengers were herded into what was described as unfinished barracks surrounded by pools of stagnant water. They were expected to find their own place to relieve and wash themselves in a wild, soggy, mosquito-infested, swampy area. The immigrants remained under guard in the barracks until the planters came to claim their commodities. Employers wanted good, strong, healthy men who would be able to dig, plow and perform back-breaking work and turn virgin soil in a subtropical area into productive arable land. Women and children were seen as dead stock. Their tasks entailed tilling the soil, planting, fertilizing, weeding, harvesting, loading, transporting, milling, packaging, leveling roads, as well as building dams, factories and houses, and carrying out repairs and so forth. The conditions at work were harsh, with long working hours and low wages. Given the weak physical condition of the laborers after the long voyage, this work took its toll. Children were expected to work alongside their parents from the time they were 5 years old.
Yeah, big wow.
If you woke up late, that is later than 3 a.m., you got whipped. No matter what happened, whether there was rain or thunder, you had to work. The Indian indentured laborers worked from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week, and reports of rations and wages being withheld were common. Many workers tried to escape their harsh life, but were recaptured and imprisoned.
Wow. What's crazy to me is the government signing contracts to further slavery. You know, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Yeah, they were laborers, but this is slavery.
It is.
You know, recapturing them and putting them in prison. Like,
they were trying to get away and they wanted them to stay in. They were under contract. It was way too much. And then it was coming with an intellect that he didn't like. Like, the English wasn't their, you know what I'm saying, wasn't their tongue 100%. They couldn't read the contracts like they really wanted to. So whenever they would go to just sign off, they didn't realize they was signing their life away.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
Right. They basically told them what they wanted them to believe to come. Whew.
Sometimes their initial 5-year contract was doubled to 10 years for attempting to flee.
Double.
In the 1870s, a new class of immigrants arrived. These were called passenger Indians, and these were Indians who had paid their own way to come to South Africa. They were mostly from Gujarati and were traders and mostly Muslim. They began to set up businesses in Natal, the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, and to compete with white shopkeepers who felt threatened by the competition. In Natal, the number of Indians had surpassed the number of whites by the 1890s, and the dangers posed by the Indian vote became a rallying point for white people. The white settlers started to feel threatened by a settled Indian population and passed legislation to curb their immigration, trading, employment, and residence rights. In 1891, a law known as Act No. 25 was passed, and it withdrew the promise of land and citizenship to the indentured laborers.
Wow.
Only 51 Indians received crown land from the colony. Anti-Indian legislation had intensified as South Africa became increasingly segregated, and the act was to discourage permanent Indian settlement in the country. By 1888, Indians had to carry passes and could not own land, vote, or live outside of their designated areas. While thousands of laborers toiled on the sugar plantations, it was the British sugar barons who made big money from this bittersweet enterprise. By 1910, nearly 30% of the indentured laborers returned to India, but most chose to stay and thus constituted the forebearers of the majority of present-day South African Indians. Some re-indentured and some leased or bought small plots of land which they cultivated. The struggle of Indians against racist legislation.
When I hear that they re-entered into these contracts, it makes me think of our sharecroppers and how some of our people stayed on the plantations here in the States and continued to work for the people they were just emancipated from. You know, and it's like, what do I do? I'm here. I have no family. I have no fortune. I have nothing. All I know is these people who I've worked for all this time. You know, so pretty much. What do you decide?
Yeah, and it's crazy because then they're putting laws in place that, you know, it stops them from benefiting from what they came to do. Right. Which was to obtain land, obtain more crops
in the future.
You know what I'm saying? And then it was they just came and outnumbered. They started to overtake the land and the homes, and it was like, no, we need a law that's going to stop this. Yeah. And that's shocking.
Oh Lord, I'm tensing up thinking about all this.
Was spearheaded by Mohandas Gandhi, also known as Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi, who came to Durban in 1893, opposed discrimination against Indians. In Natal, he organized protests against obligatory registration, which seriously restricted the freedom to move of all Asians and was partly successful. Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of the Indian freedom movement, saw firsthand the plight of Asian indentured laborers in South Africa and campaigned on this issue during the first decade of the 20th century. By 1911, India had prohibited its citizens from coming to Natal because of ill treatment. The system of indentured labor was officially abolished by the British government in 1917. During apartheid in South Africa, the Indians were discriminated against by the apartheid legislation, such as the Group Areas Act, which was applied in 1950. During apartheid in South Africa, the Indians
Natives, Indians, colors, if you enter these premises at night, you will be listed as missing. Armed guards shoot on sight. Savage dogs devour your corpse. I've seen signs like this here. I've seen those signs. Not currently, but like in our history books.
Right.
In our research, I've seen signs like this. Sundown towns and all.
Basically.
That's what this reminds me of, sundown town. Sundown town, if you enter these premises at night.
Yeah.
Woo! You have been warned.
That's crazy.
Were discriminated against by the apartheid legislation, such as the Group Areas Act, which was applied in 1950. Indians were forcibly moved into Indian townships, such as Chatsworth and Phoenix, and had their movements restricted. They were also, as a matter of state policy, given an inferior education compared to white South Africans. In 1961, Indians were officially recognized as a permanent part of the South African population. Many Indians went and played an important role in the struggle against apartheid. The small Indian, colored and white progressive sectors joined with progressive African activists, and together they conducted a common non-racial struggle for freedom and equality. As I mentioned earlier, Between November 1860 and 1911, nearly 152,000 indentured laborers from across India arrived in Natal, South Africa. From this painful story, today South Africa is home to the largest population of people of Indian descent on the African continent, and South Africa is well and truly home for them. This has been today's episode of African Biographics. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to...
Man, India stood up. They stood up and they handled their business and they joined forces.
They joined with the natives, the colors, and they fought against it. And we're glad that you all won that fight.
100%.
You know, this was painful. It was. That was a good title, Painful.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's deeper than what we got today.
This is only 11 minutes. But yeah, we would love to learn more about your culture. We hope you guys enjoyed this video with us. Like this video, subscribe, turn on the post notification bell. We have enabled our super thanks if you like support the channel that way, as well as our reaction request form is in our description box below. We'll see you soon.
Peace.